So, we're coming towards the end now of our series of talk, Faces of Enlightenment, where we've been exploring enlightenment through a symbol, or you could say a series, a kind of complex series of symbols, a set of symbols called a mandala of the 5 Buddhas. And we've been exploring the 5 different Buddhas in this mandala, going around each in turn and just looking at them, looking at the symbolism, looking at what they communicate to us about enlightenment, this state of enlightenment. And then we're doing that again, we're going around each Buddha and looking at them again and focusing at particular aspects of those Buddhas. So this evening I'm going to be focusing on Amoghasiddhi, who is the green Buddha, the Buddha of midnight, the Buddha of the north. So we could adopt him as our Buddha, the Buddha of the north. And he's a Buddha of action. He's the Buddha of the action family, the karma family. And his name could be translated as something like unstoppable success. And one of the symbols, there's a lot of symbols associated with Amoghasiddhi, but one aspect of him is his connection with integration, which Bodhinaga gave a very excellent talk about Amoghasiddhi and integration. And I'll be talking a little bit more about integration later. But he has symbols of a double Vajra, a crossed Vajra. And he has a symbol, he's carried through the air by creatures which are half bird and half human. So there's symbols of unification of different aspects of ourselves, and I'll be talking a bit more about that later. But the particular symbol or aspect of Amoghasiddhi I want to focus on to begin with is his mudra or hand gesture. He holds his right hand in the gesture of fearlessness, the Abhaya mudra, the gesture of fearlessness. And it's a very powerful gesture. And it's particularly important, I think, for us in our age, in our society. It's often said that we live in an age of anxiety, a culture of anxiety. Even though we've got much better standard of living and wealth than people who lived before us, and those in other parts of the world. Actually, when I went travelling, I went to South America, lived around people who are a lot less better off than we are in the UK, but just so much more relaxed and happier than we are. I came back and was just amazed by how kind of stressed and anxious everybody seemed when I got back to the UK. And anxiety is like an epidemic. We catch it from other people, it spreads. We catch it from environments we're in, we catch it from social media, we catch it from the news. And it's striking at our introductory classes, we talk about the hindrances in the second part towards the end of the course. And often for most people, the hindrance they really struggle with in meditation and in their life is anxiety. For many of us, our anxiety causes us a lot more suffering than the things we're anxious about, the actual kind of bad things we imagine. It's our anxiety which causes us to suffer more. So this evening I want to explore this a bit. I want to explore why is it that we get anxious and fearful? Why do we do that? What kind of drives that? And what can we do about that? What can we do about this? And then I also want to explore, how do we become fearless? How do we spread confidence rather than anxiety? And in some ways I'm a good person to talk about this. I know a lot about anxiety. A lot less actually in recent times. I have to kind of look back at how I used to be really. But when I first came along to the Buddhist Centre, I was very, very anxious, and I'd lived a life with a lot of anxiety, kind of driven by anxiety really. I can remember I used to really worry a lot about what my appearance, what I looked like. I would worry a lot about what people thought about me, pleasing people. I was very nervous and shy, just trying to please people, very deferential. I'd get anxious about things that might go wrong in the future, things that might happen in the future, and worry about those. And I'd relive mistakes that I thought I'd made in the past, and worry about those. And when I began to really work with my anxiety, when I came across the Dharma and this Buddhist Centre and started to work on my anxiety, I discovered that what really fueled my anxiety was my mind, my own mind, and especially the stories that my mind came up with about reality. So yeah, it's great actually. Over the last decade or so, my anxiety has really subsided. Actually, I hardly ever get anxious in that same way. It's less familiar to me. But just in bringing this talk to mind and reflecting on the theme of anxiety, I've been noticing it more in this past week. And episodes when I've been thinking about this talk, I can notice stories such as I'm not prepared enough for this talk. I had this again today. I've not done enough preparation. It's not going to go well. I'm not going to say the right things. I'm not going to say the things that I'm supposed to say. People might not like the talk. Just kind of stories, thoughts, seem to, of their own accord, really, just kind of going through my mind. And this is how our mind works. Anxiety, the stories we tell about our experience, they kind of create their own momentum, and they operate as a cycle. We learn all about cycles in the intro course and the habits we get locked into. And our minds are like this. We get into ruts. Our mind get into kind of ruts of cyclic patterns, and we get lost in what we call prapancha, what Buddhists call prapancha. And this is the proliferation of our thinking. Our thinking kind of spreads out and gets a bit out of control. It's mindless, unaware thinking where it's associative. Maitreya Bandha in his book, The Journey and the Guide, he's got this really, I really like this great metaphor. He calls it like a YouTube channel of the mind. And in the same way that if those of you are familiar with YouTube, you start off watching a particular video, and at the end of it, another video which is associated with that gets recommended, and then it just starts automatically. And at the end of that one, another one gets associated and starts automatically. And he says our mind is like this. A thought plays through our mind, and then almost immediately an associated thought linked to that plays through our mind, and then another one, and then another one. And YouTube has got its own algorithms, but it's like our mind has got a similar algorithm. It just kind of predicts and plays the same stories, the same thought patterns again and again and again, and we just get the same old stories repeating in our mind. So our thinking is distracted. It goes from one thing to the next thing. It's not kind of coordinated thinking, and it's habitual. Yeah, and our stories get so familiar, we get attached to them. We become identified with them. It's our version of our life. It's how we make sense of life. And we kind of then start to edit things out that don't fit in with our stories. So we're so attached to our stories about life that we just kind of miss out and edit out the bits of our experience that don't fit in with those stories. So stories start to take on a life of their own. This prapancha, it takes on a life of its own. And before you know it, the prapancha has become your reality. You're now living in your own stories, in your own head, rather than with what's actually happening, what's actually taking place. And if your stories are kind of anxious stories, then your reality is going to be a threatening, kind of dangerous, unstable, unpleasant reality. And there's I suppose a trivial example of this, but I went to see a film called Yesterday, which had just come out, and I went to see it at the weekend. And it's an okay film. It's not a film review right now. It's an okay film, but it was really nice to see the songs of the Beatles and hear the songs of the Beatles kind of performed and played. And one of the main songs is Yesterday, which is a very, very beautiful song. But then I was reflecting on the lyrics, and basically the lyrics are prapancha. It's kind of anxious prapancha. It's a guy saying, yesterday all my troubles seemed so far away, but now it looks like my troubles are here to stay. Suddenly, I'm not half the man I used to be. There's a shadow hanging over me. So it's just this, I thought, come on, Paul, or John, whoever it was. Just think more positively. It can't be as bad as that, come on. But it can be very hard to detect our stories. We're lost in it, and it's most of the time, it kind of is just dwelling below the surface of our awareness. So if I have any anxiety these days, it's a kind of background anxiety just below the kind of level of awareness. And I might not realize that I'm anxious, I'm just not aware of it. But if I think back, it would start off as a kind of fear, like a random fear, and then the stories would kind of build up and I'd get more anxious, and then I'd get lost in the anxiety. And then it's as though I was living in this anxiety, this fear, and then I'd shrink away from the world, kind of out of fear. And there's a bodily counterpart to these, to the mental aspect of anxiety, which for me was a kind of a sinking feeling in my gut, a kind of a sense of dread, a sense of doom and dread, this kind of background worry. And because there's a sense of dread and fear, I wouldn't want to face it, I wouldn't want to look at it. I just want to distract myself from it. So, I think this is very, very common in our society. We live in a really fast-paced, chaotic society, and a lot of us live with a chronic anxiety, and we're not really sure what it is that we're anxious about or what we're frightened of. It's a kind of nameless fear and anxiety, but we're desperately trying to distract ourselves from it and just not to be with it. So how do we work with this? How do we work with fear and anxiety? And there's a teaching from the Buddha, luckily, about this, thankfully about this. And the Buddha tells a story about before he was enlightened, when he would experience fear and dread rising up in him. And he said that he made a decision to deliberately seek that out. He decided to go to seek out a place where he would experience fear and dread in a forest, a secluded forest, isolated forest, which was a bit dangerous and on the edge. And he would just walk up and down, just wait for fear and dread to arise. And then he trained himself just to experience it, just to be with that fear and that dread, and to carry on doing whatever he was doing, not to be distracted and not to be put off whatever he was doing, just to feel it and carry on doing whatever he was doing. So there was a famous book, I think it was Pema Chodron published, called Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway. And this evokes this kind of message of the Dharma. The Buddha decided just to feel whatever arose and train himself to carry on doing whatever he was doing. So this is the message of the Dharma about uncomfortable feelings, but with anxiety it's particularly powerful. Because this kind of nameless anxiety we experience, it lives, as I said, in the edge of awareness, just in the kind of shadows of our consciousness. And when we try and distract ourselves from it and run away from it, it seems bigger, it seems more threatening, more bigger, whatever it is that we're afraid of or worried about just gets bigger, gets more powerful. But when we turn to face it and just feel it and look at it, it kind of starts to fade, and we see it for what it really is. And actually, all anxiety is a bodily sensation. It's a sensation in your body, and then a gut feeling, and some accompanying habitual thought patterns. That's basically all anxiety is. And I say all it is because it's very, very, has a very powerful effect on us, but that's actually all it is. And with awareness, we can feel what's happening and start to look into it, start to explore what's happening. And we can unhook our minds from the stories, from the prapancha, step back from them, just see what they are. They're fabrications, they're not true. The stories are often just not true fabrications. And then when you step back and you're unhooked from the prapancha and you're observing it, you're no longer in the grip of it. You've got control of it, you've got a grip on that hindrance. So we learn, of course, on the introductory course, if you introduce awareness to a cyclic habit, it starts to slow it down, and it introduces a gap where we've got a choice, we've got a choice. And as you bring awareness to anxiety, earlier and earlier in the cycle, you can start to unhook your mind before it really takes off, before those stories really take off and get out of control. So you're less and less ruled by anxiety. This was my experience, and it really did work for me. And when you're in the gap as well, you can start to question those stories. You can notice the stories and question them. Just introduce positive thinking, wise thinking, realistic thinking. So you can shine the light of reason onto anxiety and question the story. So when a story starts to take hold, what is the worst that could happen? You could ask yourself, what actually is the worst that could happen here? Would that be so terrible? Is that really true? Is this story that I'm telling myself, is that really true? Is that really going to happen? How likely is it to happen? And how many times have I thought about things, been anxious about things, and they never happened? Just kind of start to question these stories, and you can weaken them. They just lose their power, their grip. And there's an experiment I'll invite you to try if you're an anxious person. This was something Amoghasiddhi suggested to me years and years and years ago, which was I used to run my own company, and I'd be always thinking about what might go wrong, all the things that might go wrong. And I remember Amoghasiddhi saying to me, why don't you have an experiment and just think about what would be the best thing that could happen? And instead of just living in the worst case scenario all the time, why not just live in the best case scenario, just kind of live in a world where you expect the best possible thing to happen in each situation. And he said, well, neither thing's going to happen. The worst thing's not going to happen, and the best thing's not going to happen most of the time. But your experience of life is going to be so much better. just living in a world where good things are going to happen. And it was really, really magical, actually. And what actually started to happen was better things started to happen. My mind really did seem to be influencing events and experiences. And me and my business partner started to call it the Jedi mind trick. It's kind of... I started to go into sales meetings thinking I'm going to get a massive deal from this company, and then they say, yeah, we'll take this deal with you, and I started to feel a bit uneasy and unethical, actually. So at that point stopped doing sales and eventually left the business. It was the start of the end of the business. But I learned how powerful the mind is really, that you can really make good or bad things happen with your mental states. So we can do this in meditation as well, and we need to be doing this in meditation, working with the hindrances in meditation and applying antidotes to those. So, and a good place to do this, especially, is the mindfulness of breathing, and we'll be doing the mindfulness of breathing after the break. So you get practice in meditation at turning towards whatever's happening, turning towards the anxiety when it surfaces, rather than distracting yourself or turning away from it, really looking at it. And the first antidote you can try is just naming it, just labeling, this is anxiety. Just see if that takes the sting, the kind of power out of it. And then you can feel that anxiety as sensations in your body, as Vedana, sensations in your body. Unhook your awareness from those thoughts, those kind of the papancha, those proliferating thoughts, and just come back to return to the body and the breath in the body and the sensations. And yeah, Mahatma Bandhu is great at describing these things in his book, The Journey and the Guide, and I really like his sense of humour. But he says, in a way, we need to think about direct experience. So we're not thinking about experience. So he says we end up oftentimes thinking about our body rather than feeling it, and the aim is to try and directly feel it, not think about it. And he said it's okay if we don't feel much to begin with, we need to practice. It's, to begin with, we might not be able to feel that much in our body. But there's a really nice quote I want to share with you from his book. He says, awareness of the body is the key to stepping out of prapancha. Awareness of the body is the key to stepping out of prapancha. After all, it's not our knee that's worrying about tomorrow, which I really like. It's not our knee that's worrying about tomorrow. So if you're bring your attention to your knee isn't going to be worrying about tomorrow, and that's going to be much more pleasant. Yeah. So we can be in the gap and just keep coming back to the breath, come back to the breath. And I just like to stress the importance of the stages in the mindfulness of breathing, that structure of the practice, and of counting, because counting cuts through our thinking. If you're using counting with the breath, it cuts through those thought patterns. So it's really important, the stages of the mindfulness of breathing, especially the counting. And the second aspect of meditation I wanted to talk about is you might be fortunate enough, hopefully you will have experienced this already, either in retreats or in other situations. You can really touch in meditation the heights and depths of the mind. You can really experience the mind in very, very different ways. You can experience beauty, expansiveness, real meaning and value in meditation. And then you know from your own experience that there's much more to the mind than this kind of surface level froth and foam of all the anxious thoughts. You can remember and reconnect with those experiences, this kind of just, below the surface of the mind, this kind of deeper, the depths, the riches of the mind, this kind of calm and groundedness. So in meditation, we can both directly work on anxiety, but we can also experience the opposite of that. We can experience depths of calm and groundedness, expansiveness, beauty. So ideally, we want to be, over time, cultivating the opposite of anxiety, which is another of the traditional antidotes, cultivating the opposite. Cultivating a personality and a mindset which is calm and grounded and centered and positive. And we can become that kind of person. We can become a person who is calm, a person who is centered and grounded, a person who is integrated, has a sense of purpose, a sense of agency, optimism. And then as we become increasingly confident and fearless, we start to give that to other people, this gift of fearlessness. We give that to other people. Because, as I said earlier, anxiety is contagious. And what a gift if you can be somebody who in a situation doesn't buy into that, it doesn't get infected with that anxiety, but just brings calm, brings perspective, just brings confidence to other people. What a gift that can be in a situation. And I'm thinking of Maitri Varsin and Amoghasiddhi's positivity and friendliness. They're always telling me how good I am at things and how well I'm doing. It just fills me with confidence, rather than me feeling anxious about a talk or what I've got to do. I feel, I feel really great. And so they give that confidence. And I think about Vedana's vision and inspiration, which is really inspiring and brings confidence. He's really in touch with what the Dharma is really about and what the Sangha is really for, that sense of vision. And then the reliability of order members like Amoghasiddhi, Suyamati, Vedana, that you can always count on for not just for a few months, for decades, has come every week to Sangha night, every week to Mitra study, to festivals. And again, that stability, that reliability brings real confidence. So thank you. Yeah. So someone who is whole and integrated will be someone who brings confidence and can give fearlessness to other people. So someone who is integrated is calm, and they're whole, and they're grounded and centered. And they have a real presence, they have a real impact on the people around them. They're able to be consistent in different situations, they can be relied upon. They can act and make things happen around them. So Amoghasiddhi, as I said earlier, Amoghasiddhi is the Buddha of action. He's the Buddha, you could say, that makes things happen. And the green Buddha Amoghasiddhi really makes an entrance, he really makes an impact when he arrives. He's carried through the air at great speed by these shang birds who are clashing cymbals together really loudly. So it's a really dramatic entrance. You know when Amoghasiddhi's arrived, and you can relax, you can feel confident, because Amoghasiddhi's here, it's going to be all right. So Amoghasiddhi, as I said earlier, as well as fearlessness, he's associated with integration. He has these symbols of integration. So he has the crossed Vajra. So the Vajra is a symbol of the enlightened mind, but it's a symbol of a mind that's filled with energy, kind of crackling with energy, and creative energy, wisdom. So a crossed Vajra symbolizes all of the different energies of our being, of our consciousness, unified and harmonized, gathered together. And the Shangshangs, they're part human, part animal. So again, it really strongly suggests the integration of different aspects of ourselves, our human aspects, and our animal aspects, the kind of bits of us that are a bit more like animals. And then this crash of the symbols, for me, it really suggests there's a great release of energy when bits of ourselves get integrated, when they're no longer locked in conflict with each other. Tremendous energy gets released, and for me, the crash of the symbols of the Shangshangs really evokes this for me. So we begin our Dharma life unintegrated. I certainly began my Dharma life unintegrated, and it's Vedanya. I'd really recommend, if you weren't here for Vedanya's talk, listen to that. He really evokes that state of unintegration and integration, what that's like. But it's as though there's lots of different parts within us, lots of different cells within us. And they're all competing for control. They're all in conflict, in battle with each other. And it's a bit like Vedanya said, our Houses of Parliament at the moment, unfortunately, which is just deadlocked by polarised sides, just completely in conflict, and no action, nothing able to happen. And we can be a bit like this. It's like we can't get things done, we can't act, we can't make things happen, because we're just locked in these inner conflicts. All this energy tied up. And we remain unintegrated as long as we don't really know ourselves, we don't really know the different parts of ourselves. So we can have an idea about ourselves, and we think we're this kind of person, but others see us in a different light. We have big blind spots, there's bits of us we're just completely unaware of. So this can express itself in different ways, but a common way is we'll make a commitment, we'll really sincerely make a commitment, I'm going to do this, and really mean it. But the following day or the following week, we just no longer seem to have the enthusiasm for it, or the interest, or the energy for it. It's just, somehow that seems to have gone. We're no longer that same person almost. And in that situation, when we're unintegrated, we can't be really relied upon, we can't be trusted, because we can't follow through on the things we say we're going to do. And there's a humiliating example of this for me when I first came along. I've told this before, but there'll probably be lots of people not heard this story. It was my light bulb moment, my light bulb story. And I'd probably been coming to the centre for a couple of years, and it was the time when Amoghasiddhi was the chair of the Buddhist Centre. And he was starting to think about stepping back and not being the chair. And he approached me and said, he took an interest in me, and which I'm very fortunate for. And we'd meet up, and he said, I'm thinking about handing on some of my responsibilities as chair. And my kind of thought process went, oh great, I could be the next chair. And I wonder what I'm going to be asked to do. And he said, I'm looking for somebody to change the light bulbs in the Buddhist Centre. Would you change the light bulbs in the Buddhist Centre? So I was kind of, my pride, my ego was a bit hurt by this, and hopefully I didn't let that show too much. But I said, okay, I'll take that on. I'll change the light bulbs in the Buddhist Centre. So I took this on with earnest, and the next weekend I came specially and I got the ladders out. Amoghasiddhi was showing where the ladders were. I got some light bulbs out and I changed the light bulbs on the ceiling. And then I never did it again. I never did it again, never managed to actually do that again. I was kind of so unintegrated that I was unable to take on the responsibility of changing the light bulbs. I had to hand that on to somebody else. That was really humiliating, this idea I had of myself of like how capable I was, and actually I was incapable of being relied upon to change the light bulbs. It was really, really humiliating, but very helpful to kind of to get that experience to learn about yourself. And it's timeless because I suppose like 13, 14 years later, I've just been actually covering that job as chair for Satyajyoti. I'm very glad he's coming back on. She's coming back tomorrow from Spain, and she's going to take that job as chair back on. So, but it's possible over many, many years to become more reliable and to be trusted to do something like that. So it is possible to change and to become more integrated, more reliable. Where am I? Oh yeah. So if we're not integrated, without that integration, we're not going to obviously have that sense of wholeness, of centeredness and groundedness. And that not being integrated creates anxiety for ourselves and breeds distraction. My experience was that when, in the past, that my life wasn't really about any one thing, and lots of different things my life was about. So I'd just be living by the whim of whoever, whichever part of me was in charge at that particular time. There was no kind of unifying thread that I was living by. And when I didn't really know what my life was for, I wasn't really sure what I was supposed to be doing in a situation. It created anxiety. I was just anxious about, am I doing what I'm supposed to be doing? Am I doing the right thing? I didn't really know what I was supposed to be doing, but I had the fear that it wasn't what I was supposed to be doing. And then what we fall back on in that situation to kind of judge our success is this list called the worldly winds, which Aryadasa introduced a week or so ago, 2 weeks ago. This list, which is basically our ego trying to get what it wants out of life, get things, get pleasure, get praise, have a good reputation. We kind of, in a situation, we end up just trying to get that from a situation. And that leads to anxiety because we can't get those things. We're not in control of events. We're not in control of other people's opinion of us. Things are constantly fluctuating. We're not in control of whether we get pleasure or pain. It's completely out of our control. So it just breeds anxiety, trying to hold on to the good things and avoid the bad things. Yeah, our usual response to this kind of anxiety is to try and control things, control the world out there. That's what we do as human beings. And Shantideva, who is a great Buddhist teacher and poet, he had a metaphor. He likened this to trying to cover the surface of the earth in shoe leather so that we didn't have an uncomfortable time, so we didn't step on anything uncomfortable. We try and just arrange the world to make it comfortable by trying to cover everything in shoe leather. And of course that sounds ridiculous, we can't, but that's what it looks like. We're trying to just control outer things to make them comfortable so we don't experience discomfort. And basically that creates anxiety because it's impossible. Just things are constantly changing and shifting all the time and they're out of our control. We can't control things. So how do we become a stronger character? How do we act with confidence and become integrated and that kind of consistent, reliable, dependable person? One thing we do, what Shantideva says we can do is control our mind. We can't control outer events, but we can control our own mind. And he says that's like putting leather on the soles of your feet. So whatever you come into contact with is going to be comfortable if your mind is a robust, positive, clear mind. It's like protecting your soles of your feet. It has the same effect. So we looked at mind training months and months ago now, but a great series of talks. We looked at mind training, just changing our response to difficulties rather than getting into anxiety, just responding differently. Whatever happens, it'll be all right. Just cultivating a robust, positive state of mind that will be okay whatever life throws at it. And Shantideva again says, well, he has a really great approach I like. He says, don't worry about something you can change. If you can change it, why worry about it? And if it's something you can't change or do anything about, why worry about it? If you can't do anything about it, what's the point in worrying about it? So in a sense, there's just no point in worrying about anything. There isn't no point at all. It's just to me, it seems to make perfect sense, doesn't it? What's the point in worrying? So for me, the first step in becoming an integrated person was committing to something to live by, that my life was about. And for me, that was the 5 precepts to begin with, the 5 precepts, just deciding that whatever situation I was going to be in, that would decide who I was, and my actions would be just committing to living by the 5 precepts. So it gives you something different to judge yourself, a different reference to the worldly winds in a situation. It's a different way of gauging success in a way, rather than external things and approval and pleasure. It's about, actually, I could start to question, is there really anything for me to worry about here? I kind of have this sense of like dread and doom and anxiety and worry. Is there anything to worry about? Have I done anything unskillful? Have I done anything unethical? Or can I be pleased with myself? And most of the time, there's just this kind of strange, nameless anxiety, and there was nothing, I hadn't done anything to feel bad about, and actually I could feel really pleased with myself. So the precepts give you a much more reliable source of references to success. So you get a better reference, and there's less need to feel anxious and worried. And the second aspect of it is you learn about yourself when you fall short, when you break the precepts, which you'll do over and over again. You learn more about yourself. You come into contact with the bits of you that you didn't know about, that are unintegrated, that aren't interested in the Dharma. You learn about those, and you can start to bring those into awareness and work with those. And thirdly, which I think I've already alluded to, like I used to really be worried about what people thought about me. And I realised there's certain people, like, why do I care what they think about me? Like, it's just, there's some people that it really doesn't matter to me what they think about. And there's other people that actually it does matter to me. Like, I value their sense of kind of morals and yes, and there's other people that I don't. And so I'm not going to be liked by everybody. I'm not going to be approved of by everybody, but I can commit to being ethical, whether people like that or not. Okay, so committing to the 5 precepts is a way of becoming integrated. In the mindfulness of breathing, just briefly again, we can gather ourselves around the breath. Every time the mind wanders off, we train it to come back, and we kind of gather ourselves around that direct experience of the breath. We become more consistently present, more whole through the mindfulness of breathing. Okay. But there can also be anxiety and fear, again, around integration, this idea of integration. For me, there's certainly bits of myself that I was scared of, that I was anxious about. I didn't want to face them. I didn't want to own up to them. Certainly didn't want other people to know about them. I'd prefer it if they didn't exist, and would just kind of try and pretend that they didn't exist, really. That was my approach. It wasn't very successful, but there was bits, particularly the bits that seem more animal in us, the kind of more animal urges and drives. I was just ashamed of those parts of me. I didn't want to integrate them. I didn't want them in my Dharma life. I wanted them out of my Dharma life. But anyway, it doesn't work. The Dharma life doesn't work. If you want to make progress in the Dharma life, you need to include all of you. All of you needs to be included in the Dharma life. I can remember being particularly fearful around the time of my ordination, when I encountered a bit of myself I really didn't like. I undertook to take the practice of Amitabha, who's a Buddha of loving kindness, which I talked about a few weeks ago. And my experience was rage. I sat down to meditate, and I was just filled with anger and rage, which really surprised me, and I was very frightened of, actually. I just thought, this is definitely wrong. This isn't supposed to be happening. This is the Buddha of loving kindness. And I'm sitting down and experiencing rage and anger. But luckily, there was an experienced meditator with me at that time, Satyaraja, a friend of mine, and he said something really helpful. He just said, well, you're bigger since your ordination. You seem a bigger person, and you're bigger than you realize. And this energy, you need it. This is an important energy, and it's expressing itself in this way because you've been kind of blocking it and pushing it away, but you need to harness this energy. So I didn't know. In a way, it reassured me that it wasn't something going wrong with my meditation, but at the same time, I needed to try and work out what to do about that and how to get into a relationship with it, how to harness this energy, which is a whole different story I've not got time for right now. But certainly what I want to draw out is there can be bits of aspects of ourselves that might frighten us, or we might be frightened about. Very brief story. I'll share a very brief story from the time of the Buddha. The Buddha went to visit some ascetics. I think they were kind of like Hindu ascetics, and they were fire worshippers. They were worshipping fire. It was a form of practice to try and be harsh to the body to make progress. And the leader of these ascetics was called Kashyapa. And he said that he had a fire chamber which was locked. And it was locked because inside the fire chamber was a Naga, a fire-breathing dragon, a fire-breathing Naga that everyone was terrified of. So no one would go into this fire chamber. But the Buddha arrived at their camp where they were meditating and said to Kashyapa, "I'd like to spend the night in your fire chamber." And Kashyapa said, "That's not a good idea, you'll be destroyed. There's a fire-breathing Naga." And the Buddha said again, "Kashyapa, allow me to spend the night in your fire chamber." And again, Kashyapa said, no, I can't, but maybe Bhagavan, or a name for the Buddha, no, Lord, you'll be destroyed if you spend the night in the fire chamber. But the Buddha asked a third time, and the rule was if the Buddha asked for something 3 times, it happened. So the Buddha said a third time, "I'd like to spend the night in your fire chamber, Kashyapa." So the Kashyapa said, "As you wish." You go into the fire chamber. And it said that the Buddha set up a meditation seat in one corner of this fire chamber. So imagine like a room the size of the Red Shrine Room, and the Buddha sat down. It said he established mindfulness. And then the Naga became annoyed with the Buddha and breathed out smoke, filled the room with smoke. And it said that the Buddha, it's a strange sutta, the Buddha responded and filled the room with smoke himself. And then it said that the Naga filled the fire chamber with flames. And then it said the Buddha responded by filling the fire chamber with flames. And the people gathered around, they were watching all these flames in the fire chamber, and they said, "Oh no, that monk is so handsome, he's going to be destroyed by the Naga." And this went on through the night. But then in the morning, the Buddha came out of the fire chamber, and then curled up in his begging bowl was the Naga, kind of shrunk and just subdued and kind of friend of the Buddha. And he presented this to Kashyapa and said, here you go, Kashyapa, here is your Naga. I have tamed his fire with fire. And this is a story I love. I love this story, and it's filled with symbolism. It's not a story to take literally, I don't think. It's a story that's trying to evoke this inner process of going into, facing with mindfulness, bits of ourselves that we're afraid of, and sitting with them, experiencing them, taking the fire, taking the heat of that fire, responding to that, not backing down. It's a fascinating kind of mythical account for me. But some of the people, in a way, we need this animal part of us, this kind of wild part of us. And some of the people I'm most impressed by in the Dharma life, especially, there's a bit of wildness about them. That animal kind of aspect is integrated under the kind of influence of the kind of human awareness, but there's a bit of wildness about them. And that gives them great strength and capacity. And when we fear parts of ourselves, there's an unease. This is my experience. There was an unease at kind of a deep level. I just wasn't at ease with myself. And that creates anxiety. And we can fear, like I said, fear other people seeing this about us. And it takes a huge amount of energy to keep bits of us suppressed in a way. Just all that energy we take up and just keeping bits of us at bay and not including them just takes up so much energy. And when you don't need to do that anymore, a tremendous amount of energy gets released, which can be applied to the Dharma life, becomes available for the Dharma life, to be expressed as metta, as compassion, as love, as strength. So people who have integrated all these different aspects of themselves, kind of the heights and the depths, they're like Amoghasiddhi carried by the Shangshangs. They have a great presence, a great impact. It's like they arrive with the cymbals crashing. You can feel when they're in the room, and it gives you confidence. It gives you fearlessness. You know things are going to be okay when they're around. Okay. So I just want to end with kind of the kind of final thing for me, which has really helped to integrate different parts of me. I talked about committing to a principle that we live by. And initially for me, that's been the 5 precepts, which of course I still commit to live by, and it's now the 10 precepts at ordination. But for me, there's something even higher than that for me, an ideal that's even higher than that for me, which I try to serve and live by, or aspire to serve and live by. And that's the Bodhisattva ideal, which Padmasambhava evoked so beautifully last week. And we're going to hear our next theme. This is a teaser for our next theme. We're going to hear about the Bodhisattva ideal and Shantideva's Bodhicharyavatara in our next theme in the weeks to come. But the Bodhisattva ideal is so beautiful to me and so attractive that it seems all the different parts of me can become interested in it. All the different bits of me can become interested in that. It's such a beautiful for me, the highest ideal possible. That it's something that I can unify around and harmonise around. I have something higher to live by, or aspire to live by. And so all the anxiety I used to experience when I first came to the Buddhist Centre, it came from a concern with myself. It was concern with myself, concern about the worldly winds, concern about my ego. What's going to go wrong for me? What will others think about me? What if I make the wrong choice? It was all anxiety, concerned with me. Once my life became about trying to serve other people, to serve something higher than me, focusing on other people more, there was much less to be anxious about, actually, just almost nothing to be anxious about. So when you've made peace with yourself and you've unified around a bigger purpose, around a bigger value, the Bodhisattva has a great sense of purpose and direction. It doesn't matter what other people would think about them. It doesn't matter what the weather's like. It doesn't matter whether there's some short-term misfortune. Their life is about something much more richer than that, much more valuable and much more significant than all of the day-to-day things that we worry about and get anxious about. And then finally, and maybe most weirdly, the thing that helps me to not be anxious is I've got a confidence in the universe. I've got a confidence that being part of something much bigger and things are going to be all right. I've got this kind of trust and confidence in the universe. I don't think it's naive. It feels like there's something, I'm joining in with something very beautiful and beneficent in the universe that's trying to manifest itself through Tree Ratnath and through the Sheffield Buddhist Centre. And I've got this kind of deep confidence in that, this deep trust that, it's going to be all right somehow. It seems to have worked out that way. So that might sound a bit more weird and less kind of evidence-based, but it does, to me, seem like that. I've got confidence and trust that there's something very significant, even magical, going on around the Sheffield Buddhist Centre, and I'm delighted to be able to give myself to that. And so I just want to end with just evoking this sense of the Bodhisattva ideal, maybe again a bit of a teaser for our theme to come, with some words from our sevenfold puja, which comes from Shantideva. And this is what I would like to live like this. This is what I aspire to live like. With no sense of loss, I give myself to the Buddhas. I give my merits for the benefit of all. May I be the doctor, may I be the nurse for all beings until the world is cured. May I be a light for those who are lost. May I be a harbour for those that need shelter. Like the earth and the water, like the fire and the air, may I be a servant to beings on earth until the world is whole.